Welcome back to Paul's Tech News. It is the first episode of 2025, and I have returned just in the nick of time to perform much needed maintenance on the tech world's plumbing, which has become clogged and overburdened with the piled and steaming stories that were squeezed out just in the past week since CES. Nvidia seems to have the whole world edging towards an explosive simultaneous release when the RTX 5090 actually launches, with reviews rumored to go up Thursday and plenty to discuss in the meantime. AMD is keen to join in on the action with distracting RX 9070 rumors designed to attract wandering eyes, and Intel just got so excited that their launch came early. Oops, with the Arc B570 debuting to positive reviews Thursday with a couple major asterisks. The new year is already off to a wild and unexpected start, but we know better than to ask how things could get worse. This is 2025 after all, so grab yourself a beverage, get yourself into a comfortable viewing position, and repeat this year's catchphrase after me. Yikes.
Excellent!
Today's video is brought to you by the Paul's Hardware store on paulshardware.net, the only official source for Paul's Hardware merchandise. Tantalizing t-shirts, brilliant beer sets, high-quality hoodies, and more, all featuring the classic thumbscrew for tasteful and refined viewers, or the 8-bit thumbscrew for tasteful and refined viewers who hate curves. New designs are added sporadically and at random, so head over to paulshardware.net and get some of that sweet, sweet merch right now. Or not right now, after you watch the video. Either way. As we straddle the no man's land betwixt GPU announcement and GPU launch, there has been a lot of new information tossed around about the NVIDIA RTX 50 series, and specifically the RTX 5090 and RTX 5080 that, per NVIDIA, will go up for sale on January 30th. And I think that's important to distinguish right now, what NVIDIA has verified versus what is still rumored. We know the 4 RTX 50 series cards in the initial lineup and their prices made public in the CES keynote, and we know the January 30th for sale date for the 5080 and 5090. We know a lot more about the design of the 5090's cooler, which is indeed a true 2-slot solution for a 575-watt GPU, thanks to the Gamers Nexus interview with NVIDIA thermal engineer Malcolm Gutenberg, revealing much of the thought and design process that went into such a remarkable cooler. We still don't know exactly how that cooler performs though, so taking a step down from the verifiable data, we have slightly more dubious info. NVIDIA provided benchmark graphs, for example, which are presumably derived from actual testing data, but often eschew helpful details like hashes and labels on the y-axis, or sane representations of comparative values. That's an awful funny way of representing a 5 and 10% quality improvement, NVIDIA, which is dumb because I don't want to spend my time pointing out these obvious shenanigans, but I feel obligated to because I don't like this type of willfully misleading data. Like the RTX 5070 is equal to or better than a 4090 slide from the keynote, which was first repeated ad nauseum across the interwebs with little to no caveats, and then a second wave of content came out that said, wait a minute, NVIDIA, what's with you tricking people with these fake frames? The truth is that first, NVIDIA made a very BS statement claiming an RTX 5070 with multi-frame generation enabled, a DLSS 4 feature that only works with the 50 series, can produce a frame rate equal to or better than an RTX 4090. Extremely misleading because generated frames do not contain new game engine data, so they're not equivalent to traditionally rendered frames. So that's frustrating. But on the flip side, there's now a fake frames scandal. NVIDIA lied to us with fake frames and fake FPS, which I think is also a disservice to NVIDIA's new technology. Generated frames are not inherently bad, they're situational, and they're especially nice as a smoothing feature in highly realistic single-player immersive titles. But all that nuance is lost because I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about why NVIDIA tricked everyone with fake frames. Rabble, rabble. For now, I suggest focusing on the leftmost two tests on NVIDIA's most recent charts, Resident Evil 4 and Horizon Forbidden West with just ray tracing and DLSS, to get an early idea of 4090 versus 5090 raw performance. It looks like a decent, modest 20 to 25% boost. And none of this DLSS 4 puffery and distraction is needed, NVIDIA. Fortunately, computerbase.de analyzed all the benchmark charts from NVIDIA to come up with these rough estimates in terms of gen-on-gen uplift, where the 5090 sees about a 33% boost, with the 5070 and 5070 Ti at 20%, and the 5080 at a slightly more disappointing 15%. Moving on to slightly more dubious sources, we have supposed review embargo dates. The 23rd for the RTX 5090 Founders, 24th for partner cards, 29th for RTX 5080 Founders, 30th for the rest of the cards, which is also the for sale date. The 5070 and 5070 Ti are still listed for February with dates TBD, and then of course there are the benchmark leaks, often uploaded to databases by errant reviewers who forgot to disconnect their test beds from the internet. For shame! Like these Geekbench tests that show the 5090 performing 26 to 37% faster in Vulkan and 7 to 15% faster in OpenCL than the 4090. And finally we have pricing rumors, but with the MSRPs already disclosed, the only remaining questions are how much more will the other GPUs cost, the partner cards, and $1,400 5080s have been spotted along with $2,800 RTX 5090s, but I always caution that early pricing info is usually the least trustworthy kind of leak. And how many cards there will actually be for sale, will they sell out, will they leave us at the mercy of evil pox-ridden scalpers is a much better question. But we won't know the answer to that question until January 30th. Or more likely the first week of February. As Nvidia's marketing machine laps up international media attention, AMD has been doing their best to provide the occasional distraction with further reveals about their Radeon 9000 series cards, of which we saw the RX 9070 and RX 9070 XT sort of debut at CES. AMD didn't really announce the cards at their keynote, but reviewers were still briefed and shared that info with fans who started to ask all sorts of questions like when would they be launching, and why AMD didn't share more when they had a large audience for CES. At this point, it's safe to say that AMD is reacting to Nvidia, and further details about the Nvidia RTX 50 series, particularly the 5070 and 5070 Ti, will greatly influence AMD's ultimate decisions about how they price their new RDNA 4 GPUs. Some seemed to believe that AMD was running scared, and that Nvidia's could have been worse pricing for the 50 series, like the $550 RTX 5070, put them in a tough spot. But others are more optimistic that AMD has a contender on its hands, and their marketing team has fueled that by stating that early performance leaks in late 2024 were way off. It has been confirmed that both of the new cards will have a 16GB VRAM allocation, which is 33% more than the 5070's 12 gigs, and if performance leaks like this one from ChipHell are any indication, the 9070 XT might be in the RTX 4070 Ti range with ray trace titles and RTX 4080 range for rasterization. That might be an optimistic take. These results were posted to the ChipHell forums, but even if these new cards fall short of the RTX 5070, AMD could make them a compelling option by pricing them in the $400 to $500 range and undercutting Team Green. Intel, meanwhile, fulfilled their promise to launch the Arc B580's little bro, the Arc B570, on Thursday. It's a $220 MSRP card with 10 gigs of VRAM that brings both the advantages and disadvantages of the B580 along with it. On the plus side, the B570's performance scales in a linear fashion with the price, making the cost per frame almost identical to the B580. And the B580's strongest selling point was its value, so that's good. The B570 also does better at higher resolutions, giving budget gamers a path from 1080 to 1440, for example. On the minus side, as originally highlighted by Hardware Canucks, Battlemage performance suffers a bit when paired with more modest CPUs, like the Ryzen 5600, which is a much more likely pairing for a budget system with a budget GPU, and that hurts the value proposition. The cost per frame benefit is also reduced when upscaling performance with DLSS, FSR, and XeSS is taken into account. Also, there's the B580's availability issues in that it isn't available, at least not at the $250 MSRP, and it hasn't been for the past month or so. Getting back to positive things though, the CPU pairing problem seems less pronounced with the B570, at least in Hardware Unboxed Steve's benchmarks, and at least for now, the B570 is still available at Newegg. There's a couple models, one for $220 and one for $230. Add to cart, and that's a day or two after launch. Now just go back 10 years or so and tell someone that Intel's GPUs will be one of the best options for budget PC gaming, and see how long it takes them to burn you at the stake. I think that was a thing 10 years or so ago. Something that wasn't a thing 10 years ago was tech briefs, because they've always been ahead of their time. What a weird ride Intel's Raptor Lake CPUs like the 14900K have been on. First, they were pretty good, but hot, and AMD's X3D CPUs made them look bad. Then they had those degradation and instability issues, and everyone hated them. And then Core Ultra came out, and it turned out the 14900K was still faster for a lot of things, so I guess that made it good again. And now it's even gooder as the fastest CPU ever in terms of frequency, and that's because Chinese overclocker RTX on HardwareBot overclocked a 14900KF to 9.12 GHz, beating the former record holder, who you might have heard of, Elmore from Elmore Labs. An Asus ROG Maximus Z790 Apex and 16 gigs of DDR5 memory was used, as well as Windows 7? Okay, and presumably liquid nitrogen or helium for cooling. Good to see Intel back on top. And it was also weird to see Linus Sebastian on Jimmy Fallon's The Tonight Show, sitting opposite Bad Bunny for some reason, shamelessly wearing his socks and sandals, which is illegal here in the US, and exhibiting some serious nervous excitement for a bit until he settled down to talk about some tech toys he brought over from CES, such as a Lenovo laptop with a rollable OLED screen, like I've been predicting they'd do for years, and wearable X-Real 1 Pro glasses that project up to a 160-inch display right in front of your eyeballs. Things went smoothly, apart from when Linus tried to explain what a waifu is, which went right over Jimmy's head, as one might expect.
Okay, waifu.
Wi-Fi? No, it's like a girlfriend, but digital. Okay. Yeah, don't worry too much about it. Anyway, the point is...
TikTok, the popular social media and video sharing app, will apparently be shut down in the US by the time you watch this, supposedly due to security issues, unless it can find a US-based buyer. This has caused much distress to people who enjoy portrait format video and not being able to actively choose which content gets fed to your eyeballs with each successive swipe. I've always been something of a TikTok juggernaut, so you can imagine my disappointment, but fortunately many users are fleeing to alternative apps like China's Xiaohongshu, which translates to Little Red Book, a reference to Mao's Little Red Book, nothing ominous about that, and this is of course to spite the US government by using a platform that's even more questionably mired in potential ties to the Chinese government, unless this all gets reversed at the last minute. Fingers crossed. So let's take a moment to remember TikTok and all the good times we had there. Speaking of good times, my good friend Kyle is looking for those to return after his return from Las Vegas last week ended with the disappointing discovery of a burned down house. Despite losing most of his worldly possessions in the conflagration, Kyle has maintained his poise and perspective, and I am happy to say he got some good news this week. He has a new place. It's not much, but it has the essentials, and if you're interested in a more detailed account of his experience last week, as he discovered that his house was about to burn down, he discussed it in his most recent super special podcast that's linked in the description. Looking good, Kyle. Almost looks like there's enough room for a benchmarking test bed in there too. But there you have it guys, tech news for the week, and if you liked it, click that like button or leave me a comment down below. While you're down there, all of the articles I talked about today are linked in the video's description if you're interested, and you can check out my store at paulshardware.net for high quality merchandise, t-shirts, hoodies, beer sets, and more. Subscribing to my channel is always a good call too. Thanks again everyone, and oh, what's this? You want to know what's in the box? It's $50.90 of course. See you next week.